Hello and welcome to the first proper tutorial. I'll be actually going through everything step by step, or I'll try to. If there's anything I can clarify for you, just leave it in the comments and I'll get back to you. For this tutorial, we'll be looking at coloring any kind of piece you may have from black and white to color, doing it in simple methods, so you don't have to, do it through a million brushstrokes. You can just use things such as gradient maps or layer types and curves, which I've been using recently. These things take not so much effort compared to, coloring something from the get-go, and they're actually not so difficult, especially once you get used to them. And yeah, without further ado, let's give it a shot. Oh, first of all, this is a piece I'd done about a year ago now, a year and a half ago, and the colors might seem, complex and detailed, if I may say so myself. But it's actually a value painting. It was initially done completely in black and white, and by adding just two layers, this rainbow one and a gradient map for all the warm tones, it colors all the values for you, and I'll go through how to do this specifically. But it's quite simple, easy to get a hang of, and yeah, let's jump right into it. Put together three spheres and name the file balls appropriately. And let's, for the ball A, let's try a gradient map. That's not what I'm trying to do. So go down to this half circle down here and click on gradient maps. This will pop up this menu, and once you click on the middle bar, this value bar, you'll get this menu, the gradient editor. And what this does is pretty simple. Everything on the left of this bar is to do with the dark values in your painting. Everything on the right has to do with light values in your painting. But first of all, let's go ahead and clip this on the layer right beneath it. This way, everything you do on this gradient map will only affect the clipped layer, which is ball A. So let's go ahead and open that menu up again. And let's say we want a ball with a deep blue for all the dark tones and a light red or pink for all the light tones. So what we do is you go to the dark part of the value spectrum and click a dark blue. Let's go with a nice saturated dark blue and a light desaturated pink for the light values. See? It automatically assigns those colors and values to the inherent values of the ball. And before we go any further, let's add a black and white hue layer. Actually, this is a pretty useful trick. If you ever want to flip from color to black and white really quickly at a click of a button, what you're going to want to do is you just make a layer at the top of your layer bar and paint the whole thing black, and then switch the layer type to hue. What this does is it just negates all the hues underneath it. It doesn't mess with the values, it just messes with the colors. So as you can see, when we click on and off our gradient map, the values do change because the gradient map not only changes color, but also changes values. But if you want to negate that, if you want to eliminate it completely, you change the layer type of the gradient map to color. See? This way, it only changes the colors, but not the values. Uh, it might sound a little weird with me explaining it like this, but go ahead and play around with it, and you'll know what I'm saying. You'll know what I'm saying. And let's go ahead. You can add not only two tones, but as many as you'd like. But make sure your values correspond to the values of the ball. Like, for example, if I pick a very light color and stick it right in the middle, it'll look kind of weird. Like it doesn't really make sense. And if I put another light tone, it just starts looking more and more strange. Like the colors are random and there's no the light source doesn't make sense anymore. So make sure to just have colors and values that are corresponding to the inherent values of the ball. So here you want a slightly lighter blue. Maybe change the hue up a little bit, bring it closer to the purples. And then same here, lighter and less saturated and closer to the color we want. You can move these around. Also, you can move the middle nodes so it has more leniency towards one node than to the other. So we'll go ahead and play around with this. It's actually a really useful little tool, and you can paint a sphere like this in seconds, literally. And this would take you, if you're very used to the program, maybe half a minute in physically painting it. And if you're not so experienced with the program, this could take you up to 20 minutes to color a ball accurately. And so this is a really great time saver, and it's worth learning. And you can apply the different layer modes to this gradient map, so you can do all kinds of things. Just by incorporating all these different elements, this gradient map becomes more and more useful. So anyway, that's type A, and out of all three, this is the middle difficulty. Out of the three methods I'm about to show you, the one easier than this is quite simple. You just start a new layer, and you pick the color you want. Let's go with medium-ish green. Color everything, and remember to clip it so it only affects the ball. So ball B, and you'll notice the whole thing is green. We took out all the values, which is not what you want typically. Again, you can use the trick I showed you and switch it to a color layer, in which case it just colors it plainly. But it doesn't look that attractive. The colors are flat, the values are still there, but it doesn't look realistic color-wise. So some things you can do here is play around with the layer style. These are a bunch of layer options, and how to get to that is you just double-click on the layer, and it'll open up this menu for you. And these two bars down here, pretty useful stuff. I didn't actually notice these until several years into the program, and I started using them. Actually, quite useful. What they do is they tell the layer to only activate in certain values. For example, if I move this dark side up, it'll stop activating itself on the dark parts of the ball. It'll just stop rendering there. And likewise for the other side, if you pull this down, all the light sides start to disappear. And you might realize this kind of looks like crap. It's not really what you want. But if you hold the Alt key and you click on it, it'll create a gradient where it slowly fades away in the light zones. And you can do the same thing on the other side. So you get a more natural feeling application of this layer. So let's say you can do this in multiple layers. So let's say we want to do the same thing with a deep blue on the darks and a light pink on the brights. Actually, let's flip it. Let's go red for dark and blue for light. So let's go with a dark red. Slap that on there, clip it on. And let's go with nope, that's not what I want. Let's go with a blue. A light blue. There we go. And by tweaking the layer style, let's put this all the way down and then split it so it only starts to activate on the dark parts of the ball. And you can do the same with the other if you wish. You don't necessarily need to because the red layer is overriding the blue layer since it's on top of it. But for good measure, you can have like a strange desaturated gray area between the two, which might be what you're looking for, or not. Up to you. But yeah, and you can just pile on as many layers as you want and then tweak the colors afterwards. It's just a very simple way of coloring. It's a bit, what's the term? It's a bit bootleg. It's not the neatest thing you could do. You'll just have a bunch of stacked layers and modifications to these layers. But that beats painting in pixel by pixel sometimes. And for C, this is perhaps the least intuitive of the three, but it is the most versatile once you get the hang of it. So you go to this half circle down here. I've been using this program for years, and I don't know what this circle is called. But anyway, you just click on it, and you click on curves. And let me just clip this on. All right. This graph looks a little weird, I admit. But what this is you see these gray peaks and dips. This is the description of the ball in terms of values. So here are the dark values, which are none, because the ball isn't black. It's just shades of gray and a little bit of white. So you would expect everything to be around the middle, which it is. And these peaks mean that there's a large amount of pixels. that have this tone, which is a dark tone. I'm guessing this right here is the rim of the circle where it's the darkest. And one of these peaks, I mean, most of the stuff down here is everything else, just the middle grays and the whites is at the edge, obviously. And you can tweak the. Okay, so basically how this works is if you move the left or rightmost nodes down, I mean the top right, if you move down, you're moving it towards the dark zone. So bottom left corner is the darkest you could get, and top right corner is the brightest you could get. So if you move this down, you start to minimize the amount of white pixels you have. And it's a linear graph at this point. So as you move this down, the rest move down as well. I said I wouldn't explain it, but meh, what the hell? I'll go ahead and if it makes sense, it makes sense. If it doesn't, just skip a few minutes ahead. And if you move it up and left, you maximize the amount of white pixels. Everything starts to move up and higher, and everything starts to get brighter. But if you want to just move the node but nothing else, you can move this down and realign this so it's the same. So all you're doing when you move this is you're making the brightest pixels brighter and the darkest pixels brighter. But that's enough of that. The main thing I wanted to bring up is how you can tweak colors using the curves. In this bar down here, it'll give you access to all three channels, the red, green, and blue channels. This is only if you're using RGB file formats, which is what I recommend since they typically render better on monitors. CMKY is what you want to use if you print often. If what you're trying to do is work on something, then print out a poster or a book illustration or send it to a client who wishes to print it, you should probably do it in CMKY. And if you're just working digitally most of the time and you don't have any intent of printing, RGB is going to make your life a little bit easier. So if you click on the red tab, you can modify the amount of red and the amount of blue, since that's the opposite. And so let's pick a pattern that we want. Let's say we want the bright spots to be, let's pick a different set now. Let's make the bright spots green. And the dark spots, let's go for purpley violet kind of thing. And green is opposite. I mean, violet is kind of the opposite of green in this sense. And as you tweak all the others, the colors will tweak again because white is a combination of all of these three channels. And as you tweak one channel and then a second channel, they start to affect each other in a similar pattern, which is why this is not an intuitive method to use from the get-go. But once you start using it, you start to just get a feel of how things will look like as you move the curves up and down. And yeah, just to have a crack at it, see what you can do, what you can come up with. So these are the three basic types, and the best thing about these is you shouldn't use them alone. You can use them alone, but you should use them together, and just build one on top of the other to get some complicated patterns of color and to color specific areas of specific values, and you can tweak these at your leisure. There's very little you can't do with these three. It won't look as, let's say, painterly or handmade as if you actually did it with paint brushes. So that is honestly the best way to render something and have it look painterly and traditional is to do it in that fashion. But if you like to work in values and in black and white, like I do, I much prefer to work with black and white and then just worry about colors later, because colors they're scary. I'll be honest with you. They're not that fun to work with unless you know what you're doing. If you don't, you'll just get lost. So what I do is I just work in black and white, and then about halfway through, if I intend to color it, I'll start halfway through. And what I usually do is I apply one of these methods or all of these methods to create a template on which I will start painting and color on top of. So how it goes is I start in black and white, then I put on a gradient map or a curve or anything to slightly color some layers and aspects to get a general feel of what I want. And then I start using colored brushes and paint in a painterly fashion. That's my favorite way to approach a colored piece. But given the option, I'll probably just go for black and white. So besides the example I already showed you, which is this one, there are a few others that I made using this method. I've even grouped them into layers on this one in particular, except for a few things. You can see I used some gradient maps and some different layer modes. You can see I used a color dodge layer mode here, and all kinds of stuff. And for this one, it's just one simple gradient map. The whole thing's actually black and white. Not too complex. I did add a few other gradient maps and stuff in the post-processing, and it ended up looking a lot more diverse in terms of color. Looked more impressive than, well, it's slightly more impressive than what's on the screen here. Let me pull that up. There it is. You can see some desaturated areas where it seems to be leaning towards the blue. And I just added that in the post-processing. I finished the PSD file over here, and then I turned it into a JPEG and added a few more gradient maps and some color dodging here and there. Speaking of which, color dodging is actually something I should probably mention if I'm talking about color, because it's in the domain between color and value, and how it works is a bit strange. If you've seen any of Ross Straw's videos, you already know all about this. But let me pull up a JPG of let's go with this one since I already pulled up an example. It's desaturated so you can see the effects a bit better. All right, so let's go with normal soft brush, big round boy. And let's say we want some bright spots on the skin from natural light, like from sunlight hitting the skin. You want to go for, an orangey red kind of color, which is usually the color associated with sun rays. What you want to do is turn the flow down a bit, not too much. And this is color dodging. It's extremely effective and extremely simple. What it does is the centermost point of your brush increases the value, and the perimeter increases the value slightly while also increasing the saturation of the colors and pushing the saturation towards the color you've picked over here. This is in the case of a soft round brush. If it's a hard brush, it's basically both of those things at once, increasing the value and the color. Let's do with maximum flow so you can get the idea. See? This makes it way brighter and increases the saturation and pushes the hue of that saturation towards the color you've selected here. It looks a little janky. It's kind of like you're going through it with a highlighter if you do it with a solid brush, which is why I recommend a soft, big-ass brush. Just slap it around, and if you do it in the right spots, it looks like bright spots from sunlight. You don't have to use this kind of color. You can use it to enhance any lights or stuff like that. Like there's some green lighting over here from the device she's holding. You can enhance that with the color dodge, just to bring it out a little bit. It becomes brighter and the values around it start to pop out. And it's just it's a useful tool. Something I can recommend using. It's very easy to use. You'll get the hang of it in minutes, I'm sure. And yeah, it really pushes your illustration forward, makes it pop, increases the vibrancy of your colors. And yeah, I think I've said all I can say about this topic. Yeah, I think that's all for this tutorial. Thank you for watching, and if you do have any criticism or anything, I'd love to hear it. This is pretty much the first video with a mic and one of the first tutorial videos in general, so I'm always trying to make better content. So yeah, if you have anything to add or anything to ask, just let me know. Thanks for watching.